Okay, welcome everyone. So excited to have you all here. We're excited to be talking with Lucas today about building your recession strategy guide. As you know, Tech by Choice is a nonprofit that helps underestimated groups enter, stay, and thrive in tech. And so there's no way we weren't going to try to tackle this daunting topic that has come up recently with all the mass tech layoffs that we've had. And so we're really excited to introduce Lucas here, who will be our guest speaker. Thank you for giving me that heads up. Lucas
Recording in progress.
Lucas will be our guest speaker today, helping us through this. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to you.
Thanks for having me, Val. That was awesome. I think I reached out maybe like 10 days ago. She was on vacation. She was traveling, and she's like, yeah, let's go ahead and get something set up, and did everything on her end to make this possible. So really appreciate her, really appreciate Tech by Choice. I'm excited to be here, not necessarily because of the topic, but because of what we're able to kind of figure out today, which is building your recession strategy guide, giving you confidence to tackle some of the scary stuff that might be coming up, and it might not too. So that's one of the nice things is you can do these things that'll help you even if nothing happens, but it'll really be a huge help if you do need your recession strategy guide. So we'll dive right in. I'll have to keep the disclosures on a little bit longer for you. This basically is, since I'm a financial planner, I need to have certain disclosures that says, hey, don't take this as specific advice. This is going to be general information, education. If some stuff will require that you dig a little bit deeper on your own, kind of apply it to your personal situation. And so we can get rid of that. Really quick, who I am. So I'm a husband, father of 4. I live and work virtually out of Colorado. So we've been out here forever now, like 10 years. So we've been loving it. All our kids were born out here. I launched Level Up Financial Planning in 2017. It was actually November 2017. So I just passed the 5-year point, which pretty big for small businesses. Not too many businesses last past 5 years. And we're definitely suited to be good for the foreseeable future. So I'm really excited about all that I've been able to accomplish, all the clients I've been able to impact, the content I'm able to put out. I also ended up launching a tax firm, which is primarily to support my financial planning clients. They kept asking me every single year. And for the first couple of years, you see, I was like, no, don't do taxes. But there was enough stuff falling through the gaps with them doing it themselves, or maybe they didn't have the greatest tax person helping them out. So I did launch Power Up Tax Planning in 2020. I also have a podcast. Val was on it. A couple of people in attendance was also a guest on the show. And so you can always check that out for additional financial planning topics that might be relevant for you if you're in tech, as well as some good stories about people and their careers in tech. So today, we're going to be discussing the impacts of a recession, and it kind of goes across the board. There's a lot of things that come to mind when you think about, well, the economy is suffering and a recession might be hitting us pretty hard here in the near future. One that sticks out a lot is investment values dropping. There's higher costs. So this doesn't happen every recession, but that's really what's causing this recession is the higher costs associated with some of the things. Job loss is definitely the biggest fear. It's probably the biggest thing I'm worried about for my clients. Although some of these other things might be more top of mind for you and why you're here today. The exciting part is, so we'll talk about some of those scary things, but then we'll also start to think about, well, what can you do to build your strategy guide, navigate these kind of choppy waters as they're approaching. And the cool thing is there's tons of opportunity for growth there. If you think about any type of growth that you've experienced in life, usually it's come from some hard stuff, some scary stuff, and that's the same thing that kind of happens with the recession if you do some of the things that you can take action on and control. So really quick, did you know that 40% of Americans have actually been laid off at least once? I did not know that one, actually. I was kind of looking to see what would be some cool, interesting facts. Maybe not a cool fact, but definitely interesting that, like, yeah, almost 1 out of every 2 people have been laid off at some point. And I imagine this has to take into account, like, people that are just entering the workforce, like 18, 19, 20-year-olds and things like that. So it's pretty dramatic that most people, or almost most people, will be laid off at some point in their career. So definitely, if it's not something that you actually end up running into this year, it could be something that impacts you a couple years down the line, a couple decades down the line. There's just a good probability of that. This one, I did have a feeling for. I've been getting a lot of questions from clients, lots of people online, social media, and things like that, as far as being concerned about layoffs, being concerned about the recession, and almost 1 out of every 2 Americans do have layoff anxiety. We have it a little bit ourselves here in this household. My wife works for a traditional employer, but luckily we've done basically our own strategy guide. We have our recession strategy guide as well as long-term strategy guides that we have in place, where it's like, yeah, it would stink, it would be a pain in the butt, but we're definitely have a lot less anxiety than we would if we didn't take these steps, take control of the situation. And so hopefully with this workshop today, you're going to be able to dive in and get a little bit more information, a little bit more clarity on where you're staying and what you can do to actually improve your and relieve your stress that you have. So that first one, investments. I'm tackling this one first, not because it's the most important, but because it's the easiest one to really address. For most people, their investments, it's scary. It's the more easily identifiable thing as far as, well, what's going on today with the recession in me? Well, you look at your 401k, you look at your stock options or stock that you have, and you see red numbers some days, and some days they're green. But the nice thing is, that doesn't really impact your life. Hopefully it doesn't. There's things that you might have to do, and we'll talk about that with your strategy guide a little bit later. And I have a couple of tips here, but basically you don't want to invest anything that's gonna be short term. If you have a wedding coming up, a house that you're saving up a down payment for, anything that's important to you that where you know you're gonna need these funds in the next year or two, I would not be investing in them where there's a significant amount of risk, because what are you going to say? Sorry, I'm not going to be able to do this goal now because I was a little bit too gambly with my funds that I really needed here in the short term. So that's one thing you can do right now to actually position yourself, make sure you're not kind of gambling away whatever those future goals are that you have that are coming up here in the near future. You want to diversify your investments too, so that will help you sleep better at night. One thing I run into a lot since I serve tech clients primarily is employer stock. The employer stock keeps coming at you, and you believe in your employer most of the times. You want to believe that they're going to be doing awesome forever, and that's not always the case. Some of the top companies right now, Amazon, Netflix, all these big hitters are, it's like, oh yeah, you can't miss with these. These things always go. Well, they've actually been doing way worse than a diversified investment over the last year or so. And so that's, I know might be shocking or scary to some that, hey, some of these blue chip companies that have been around for a while and have been doing really awesome for the longest time can actually be worse off for you than just being a little bit more boring, a little bit more diversified with your investments. Short-term losses actually will be a good thing for you. As long as you keep your job and you keep working, that's going to be a good thing. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. So the higher costs, this is what I said is kind of an impact, and this is what's causing a recession. So this inflation thing has been a pain in the butt for over a year now. It started about October last year, getting really bad, didn't get better, took a while before some regulators tried jumping in and trying to get inflation under wraps. And what they're doing is they're increasing the interest rates so that the economy is not growing as fast, so that people aren't throwing money around and causing inflation to keep going up. It's finally starting to work. It's taken about a whole year to get to this point where we start to see inflation go down a little bit from month to month. But it means things just cost more than they did the previous month, and definitely from this time last year. And also, since interest rates have gone up, any new debt you get, so mortgage now is like about 7%. If you would have gotten about this time last year, probably still would have been around 3%. So pretty expensive with the higher cost of borrowing. If you had variable rates, credit cards are variable rates, home equity line of credits are variable rates. What that means is you might have made a decision with a lower rate in mind, like, oh yeah, I can afford 20% interest rates. But now, because it's a variable rate, if you haven't paid off those balances, well, that rate's gone up. Now you're probably paying 23%, 25% on that purchase decision you made before, thinking that you're okay paying some of those higher rates. And so that's one thing that's to be concerned with if you're carrying any high credit card interest rates and debt there. Job loss, this is really the biggest thing. This is the thing keeps me up at night for my clients. It really can change things and dramatically impact them if they haven't taken the steps to really protect themselves from this. I didn't even know it was that high of a probability, but what was it, that 40% chance that this will happen either now or in the future for most people. So the biggest thing is cash flow, that money that you're living off of, that you probably need a significant amount of cash flow to keep coming. That's going to disappear. If you're lucky, you might get a severance package where they'll give you a couple weeks, couple months. Some companies are better than others at that, but yes, sometimes it's not going to be enough. And so you definitely want to have a game plan. You don't want to just hope and pray that you'll get a big severance package and you get to take a vacation between now and 2 or 3 months when you start your next job. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is when you lose a job, you lose a kind of part of feeling of what your identity is. And that's actually something that is familiar for a lot of people approaching retirement. So one of the biggest issues when people try to figure out, well, when should I retire? They freak out because they don't know what they're going to do. They don't know who they are if they're not working. If they're not working for XYZ company, whoever that is, they identify so closely with it. And no wonder, right? You spend at least 40 hours a week, multiple days out of the week, for multiple years, a lot of times in these positions for these companies. And it's very easy to get caught up on, well, what am I going to do? Who am I without these things to kind of identify yourself with? Health insurance is a big one, but there's other benefits that you lose too. So health insurance is a costly one and super important, but some people need life insurance too. If they have pre-existing conditions, you can't get life insurance outside of your employer if you have a pre-existing condition in some cases. And so it really puts people in a tough spot. See, question coming in. So question, oh, that's awesome that you're able to do it anonymous too. So question coming in, do you have advice for buying a home at this time, given the uncertainty of the market, potential job loss, lowering of stock values to cash out in the future? So with this, it's going to be tricky. You need more. We'll definitely need more information in order to kind of guide you on this. So you'll want to dig a little bit deeper on this on your own. I'm not necessarily scared of purchasing a home if you haven't yet, but you do want to make sure that you have emergency savings because the worst thing you can do is bite off more than you can chew with getting a new mortgage payment and then not be able to make that payment if you lose your job. So if you're secure and you kind of have different layers of security, and we'll talk about what that is for your strategy guide, then it's going to be a personal preference. Well, how much risk are you willing to take? If you don't have any emergency savings and you're going to be doing that and it's going to be larger than your rent, well, you're going to find yourself in a tricky situation. What do I think about short-term credit services like Klarna? I'm not a fan. People have hard enough time trying to live within their own means, and those things, they can help definitely for short-term situations, but what they can also do is allow you to create bad habits, which is, oh, if I get in a tight bind, I can use these things. Usually there's some interest associated with them, and if not, well, at some point, the free 0% is going to run out. And if you're just used to living that way and living off of those things, you'll definitely run into trouble. Definitely resources out there. There's definitely things that you'll need to dive into though, right? If you do find yourself in a tight situation, don't have cash, and you need to start borrowing money, you're going to want to make sure you read the fine print. If you are going to borrow, it's always best to borrow the smallest interest rate. So kind of weigh those different options there. So at the end of the day, how do we reduce any type of stress, not only financial stress, but any stresses that we deal with in life? And you identify what you can actually control. It's not going to do you any good to be freaking out about what the Fed's doing with interest rates. It's not going to do you any good what Elon Musk is doing with Twitter and Tesla and all these things. Like, who cares? You need to focus on what you're actually able to do about your situation and take control of that. And so what you can do is build your recession strategy guide. You can kind of, hopefully you have pen and paper, something nearby where you can kind of take notes. Like Val said, this is going to be recorded, so you will have access to play this back at your own convenience. But more than anything, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, is like you want to not just take the time to be here and just kind of listen and then afterwards be like, okay, that's good, and not do anything. You want to be prepared to start taking action and start changing things, because most people need, or maybe not most people, but some of you listening really do need to start figuring out, well, what can we do to actually improve the situation and not be as stressed out about it. This is super common. It doesn't matter how much money you make. You're going to run into this question sometimes if you don't keep track of your money, which is, where is it going? So a lot of times I'll have people that start making a ton of money, six figures, and like, I make so much money. How come it doesn't feel like it's enough? Where is it going? And it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And a way that you kind of go about doing that is, well, figuring out what's important to you, spending your money in those valuable areas, making sure that you're doing other things as well, because the simple fact of not going into debt is not good enough. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. I see a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I'm doing really good. I don't have any credit card debt. I don't have any type of debt at all. And they're in their 40s. And like, well, that's good. It's definitely not a weight kind of bringing you down. But like, what are you doing to get ahead? What are you doing to build wealth? What are you doing to actually put yourself in position to not be in a really tricky spot if you are laid off? Because if you don't have savings, if you don't have resources, you are going to be finding yourself in a tricky spot. So not going into debt isn't good enough. It's better than going into debt. But if you're in tech, most likely your income, if you're a few years into tech, I could probably quantify this, and depending on where you live, you should be able to have enough excess funds to be able to do things like save and invest, so you can start to build wealth and create more opportunities for yourself. It's not to deprive yourself today, it's to create these opportunities for future you that you might not even know right now. I kind of always use the example of me starting my own business, Level Up Financial Planning, back in 2017. Well, we had resources, we did all these types of strategy guides for ourselves to kind of figure out how this was going to work. And I didn't know, as a started company, I didn't know I wanted to start one and need to use those resources. But because I allowed myself that opportunity by doing those things, it allowed me this flexibility. And so that's one of the things that you'll definitely have access to once you start to hone in on, well, are you able to save, build wealth, invest, and have resources for yourself? So where did it go? This is really the key areas most of the time. At the high overview, right? These things need to be broken down further, but taxes, I don't know if you're aware of this, if you look at your paycheck and see how crazy it is sometimes, but most people on average is gonna be 40% between Social Security, Medicare, state taxes, if your state has taxes, federal taxes, all these things just get taken away right out of your paycheck. There's also employer benefits. Sometimes your employer is awesome and they cover everything, but sometimes those things can still be pretty expensive. Hopefully you have some retirement stuff going. Hopefully you're thinking about savings just for emergency, and then kind of making sure that you're not going to find yourself in a tough spot and during a rainy day or if a layoff occurs. Required expenses, that's usually a bulk of people's expenses for sure. But if you're in tech, if I was talking to a bunch of teachers, this maybe isn't the same conversation, but if you're in tech and you've been in there a couple of years, there's probably a good chunk that's going to be in those non-essential expenses, and that's really where you'll have the most control over these things. You also get to control, well, what's important to you, what are those goals that you want to save for and build towards, and that's typically where money goes. And for you, you'll want to start tracking these things and figuring out. Some of the biggest culprits I see blowing up the budget, it's things, right? It's not necessarily, you don't need these things. We don't need certain levels of things. And gifts is something too, where it's like, oh, forgot about the holidays, forgot about birthdays. Well, if those things do come with regular occurrence, right? Like the holidays happen every single time, every single year. People's birthdays tend to happen at the same time. So these things aren't necessarily surprises. And a lot of times there's a lot of waste that goes on to you. And sometimes we're wasting the things. Sometimes we're buying groceries and then we're like, let's eat out instead. And we waste the groceries. Everything goes bad in the fridge, or some things start to go bad in the fridge. Those things all add up. It could be $5 a week, $10 a week. Those things can easily start to add up. And over the course of a year, it's like, yeah, that you probably could have used that towards something more fun than just throwing it in a garbage can. At the end of the day, you can actually do all these things, especially, again, you have the funds most likely somewhere in there. You just need to plan it out, figure out what's going to be the most value to you, your life, and kind of how you want to build that life. And if you plan these things out, you can do all these things, maybe not at the level that you would hope, but there's always opportunities in the future if you do put yourself in a good position to be able to navigate these. Here's a couple of tips as you start to think about, well, is this a good thing to spend money on? What am I doing that I could probably improve? And just these couple questions have made a big difference for me, definitely make a big difference for a lot of my clients that have some spending kind of issues where it's like, oh, you see something, you jump on Amazon now, get it probably before the end of the night. Slow down a little bit. In the past, we didn't have the ability to do these things, and you actually probably spent money a little bit less. You probably were less frivolous with it because you're like, oh, I'd have to go to the store. Well, I don't really want to go to the store. And then by the time you would have gotten around to go to the store, you don't really want or need that quite as much. Slowing down will definitely help. Slow down and ask yourself these questions. Do you need it? Do you want it? Again, wants are perfectly fine. It's just if you plan these things out, you can actually figure out, well, what do you need? Make sure all that stuff's covered, and then get some of those wants too. Can you wait to purchase this stuff? Well, Black Friday is right around the corner. I might not purchase something today, or what happens if I just wait 3 or 4 days? It might not go on sale, but if it does, I might save myself $10, $20, whatever that thing is. And sometimes just delaying it can do that. But again, in that example I use of, well, by the time in the past, if you would have had to go to the store to make this purchasing decision, sometimes you just change your mind and you don't want it anymore. You don't give yourself that opportunity now unless you slow down and actually ask yourself the question, well, can you wait? Well, if you can wait 3 months, well, what's the difference between waiting another 3 months? And just by delaying those things, you can save hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars pretty easily just by foregoing costs until you actually need it. And some things you just might not purchase at all. So I got a question on, speaking of budgets, what are my thoughts on 529 college savings plans? So that was very specific to your goals, right? So some people, I've had some people, it's like, yeah, I paid for my own college. My kids are going to pay for their own. They're going to feel what that's like and take responsibility of that. Perfectly fine. I have other people who are like, nope, I'm going to pay for everything. There are some tax benefits to 529 college savings plan. So definitely consider those. You'll want to weigh it, make sure it makes sense for you. Really the advantage for those though is going to be the tax savings benefit. Sometimes your state might reduce your taxes too by making those. So most of the expenses have gone down. That was usually the big thing that was a big issue with 529 plans in the past. When people didn't know any better, they would end up costing themselves a lot because they would hide those expenses into plans like that, and it would really cost families a whole bunch more money than if they didn't do it. But now people have caught on, costs have come way down. So make sure your expenses aren't going to be extremely high, and see what the tax benefits are. And then just be aware of the flexibility that does need to go towards college. So if you think there's a probability you might not do that, there's other things you can do. You can have Roth accounts, you could have non-retirement accounts, and kind of kick that decision to time it specific to college on later down the road. So I have clients that go both ways. We definitely have 529s for some. Some were like, let's put it somewhere else, and we'll decide if we actually want to tie this up for college specifically. One last thing on the spending habit tips here is, are there alternatives? There's a good example in a podcast I was listening to from one of my friends. I think it was just like 2 days ago. And his example of just a good alternative that he did is he goes to the gym all the time and he'd buy waters at the gym. It's probably like $2 every time he would do it. But they also had a water fountain. So someone bought him a his own kind of personal water bottle he could fill up on his own, and it was free. So it's literally whatever it cost him to wash his own bottle that he got as a gift. Go in there, get it for free. So if you go 5 times a week and it's $2, well, that's $10 right there you can save. So there's sometimes the extreme alternatives, right? Like from free to get the same type of benefit roughly of what the other thing is. And so that happens a lot in life. You go into a grocery store, it's like there's 10 different breads here. One's $10, one's $1. Like how there's so many ranges, and so that gives you flexibility to actually build the life you want. So maybe bread's not important to you. Well, buy the cheaper one as long as you don't think it's going to cause any health things, and that means that you just have $9 you use towards something else. So there's almost always alternatives. Sometimes it means that you take more time. Sometimes there's different trade-offs you have to kind of accept. But sometimes it's just a convenience, right? That's what the water bottle provides. And convenience is pretty expensive. If anyone's used to ordering DoorDash and things like that, you definitely see where the convenience kind of fees add up. So a few tips to track your money. big question I get all the time is, what's the tool, the magic tool that will just make you make better decisions? Well, that's not going to happen, right? So I can't force my clients to make better spending decisions. I can help educate them. I can kind of help guide them, help get them over some roadblocks. At the end of the day, it's going to be the best tool is going to be the one that you'll use and actually start to implement. So it could be, again, alternatives, right? It could be free and simple like Excel. Well, that might take a little bit more work. Or there's some paid alternatives. Ones that I've heard really good things about and have used them myself in the past is You Need a Budget. So YNAB is another name for that. And then there's Mint.com. So another, that one would be a free tool. Definitely they have ads and sponsors and things to make that free to you, but wide range of tools. Best one's gonna be the one that you're actually gonna use. And none of this is gonna be valuable if you're not gonna really take the time and really kind of force yourself to realize that change is going to be a little difficult, but if you get used to it, you can build some new habits, and those habits are going to serve you well, whether recession hits you or not. Personally, non-regular expenses is something that really trips people up too. So things that don't occur regularly, I kind of mentioned gifts, travel, those things don't probably happen every single week, every single month. Vehicle maintenance, home maintenance, different things like that. You want to think about, well, what has that looked like in the last year or two? And then start to average those things out and build them into a monthly. So if you have $2,000 worth of regular expenses, or I'll make it easy on the math, $2,400 of non-regular expenses every single year. Well, if you put $200 in an account, that will get pretty close to kind of getting you there. You can definitely fine tune it and be like, well, this happens this month, this happens that month. But even just put in $200 a month for those $2,400 a year in non-regular expenses will get you most of the way there versus not doing anything at all. So you can definitely put in some extra work and get it really precise, or you can just kind of use a cheat and get you closer than you would be if you didn't. So any type of progress is progress. You can use it to build momentum and keep leveling up and moving forward. I'm a big fan of separating accounts for different expense types. I'll show you what I mean by that. So this one isn't the final example of separating out. This is just kind of what happens, right? Your income comes in, you have the taxes, employer benefits, retirement, savings, required monthly, non-essential monthly, and goals. And that's kind of how it feels, right? Like money comes in, it just flies all over the place, doesn't really feel like you have control over it. Well, when I talk about splitting it up, one nice thing is the paycheck actually handles some of those things for you. The taxes, employer benefits, and retirement, typically those things are taken care of. You can have a separate account for savings, so make that nice and clear and easy. You can have a separate account for the required monthly, so that's nice because those ones you probably can't change as much, right? If your rent is a certain amount or if your mortgage is a certain amount, we're not going to be able to do that unless you sell a house or your rent's coming up and you're able to kind of change those things. But that happens once a year. Non-essential monthly, that's really the one where you probably have the most flexibility. And the nice thing is if we break that into a separate account, one of the hardest things about tracking these things is there's so many freaking expenses. Well, we separate this out. You only need to look at this one account to kind of whittle these things down. Probably cuts out a good percentage of your total transactions. Feels less overwhelming when you go in to kind of see, well, where is my money really going? Well, this is where you can control it. This is probably the more fluffy areas that you can kind of cut back on. So you can really narrow those things out, weed those out, and make it a lot easier. And then your goals, I think it's important to see like, hey, my travel's getting up there. We're going to be able to book something, not feel guilty, not have to worry about where's this money going to come from, or how's this going to shoot me in the foot in the next month or two when something else kind of pops up. So that's what I mean by breaking these things out. Those kind of color coded. If you have 4 different accounts, and some of these things could be credit cards, right? You can put. If you're good at managing your credit cards and pay them off every month and getting the rewards, one could be for required monthly, some can be for the non-essential monthly. And split those things out because it's going to be way easier to check, and you'll be able to feel like you have a lot more control. And from the savings and goal standpoint, again, it will feel a lot better working towards those things that are important to you. Had a question about like the mortgage and whether now is a good time and stuff like that. This isn't exactly related to that, but this is something I've actually seen people make big mistakes. Even before I became a financial planner, before I was a financial planner, I was a personal banker and a teller for a few years working my way through school. And one of the strangest things I would see is people would pay for a vehicle in cash, so $50,000 on a truck, like it was no big deal. But then they'd have like $30,000 in credit card debt that they're paying 22% interest on. The problem with that is the vehicle is not something that's liquid and they can access really easily. And if they would have got a vehicle loan, it would have been 3%, 4%, something really low. And instead, they're paying that off, putting in something that's not liquid, and then they're accepting some super high interest rate and paying way more when they technically would have had the funds to pay that off. So sometimes there's a lot of emotion and kind of what feels better to say, hey, I pay for a vehicle in cash. Well, you actually made a really bad decision by just kind of flip-flopping these. And so when you're worried about losing your job potentially, maybe not having enough emergency funds, you don't want to pay off mortgage loans faster than you need to. You don't want to pay off auto loans faster than you need to. That might sound counterintuitive because you might be like, well, it'd be nice to not have that monthly auto loan payment. That would be nice. But if you're using a big chunk of your savings to pay that down and something did happen and you don't have enough savings to live off of, you paid off a 4% loan, but now you're going to go into debt and you're going to have to go into that credit card debt in the 20% range. And so those things are a lot less flexible. The mortgages and auto loans actually get funds out in crisis and in case of emergency. Credit cards typically have higher interest rates, so it's actually better to pay them off anyways. But also, if things really did hit the fan, you're like, well, I paid this off instead of building my emergency savings. You saved a bunch by not paying the interest there, but if an emergency did come up, well, at least you still have those credit cards open. You're not going to close these things off because you could live off them if you need to. In the meantime, at least you paid it down and are not paying all the interest associated with that. Home equity line of credits work the same way as credit cards. Home equity line of credits will have a little bit lower interest rate. So if you had to prioritize that, definitely pay down credit cards as fast as possible because the interest is just so crazy. I think I saw 36% is the highest interest rate on credit cards right now. So just a quick example before we jump into this slide is if you had $1,000 that you had on a credit card and you just really never paid it off over the course of the year, you paid it but used it and it was always about $1,000, you'd pay $360 for whatever it was that you spent $1,000 on basically. So super expensive, you definitely want to pay those off. So when it comes to paying off debt, prioritize the things that are open lines and the ones that are more expensive for you. Don't worry about the monthly payment because that monthly payment isn't really going to help if you pay a $10,000 loan off. That's going to save you $200 a month. You're not going to get that $10,000 back when you need to access the resources. So speaking of resources, those are going to be your assets. So things that hopefully you have available to you to help you ride out any type of tough situation you might find yourself in. So emergency savings, that's the common one, right? That you think of, break in case of emergency, poor little piggy bank gets broken open, but at least you had it, right? And that's, I think that's one of the things a lot of people think, well, don't have an emergency savings. I'm just going to be screwed if something happens. I'm like, well, what if something doesn't happen for multiple months? You can start making changes now and actually put yourself so some type of savings protects you in the meantime. Unemployment is going to be a resource for most people when they get laid off. Sometimes it's not, but the thing that is insane about unemployment is it does get kept. I have my notes here. So it's in Colorado, which is actually one of the better states, one of the higher paying unemployment rate states. It's capped at $618 a week for 26 weeks. So basically on a monthly, 4 weeks to a month, roughly $2,472 to live off of. If you're making $10,000 a month normally, that's not going to come close to covering everything you need. So you'll still need emergency savings. You'll still need possibly other assets. Investments, you can tap those. The tricky thing is there could be tax consequences. There could be penalties still there. So they're still in play. They're just not going to be the first line of defense if you have other options. And right now, at least, they have fallen. And so if they haven't bounced back, you're also going to be selling these things low, which is when you think about investing, the kind of tip is buy low, sell high. Right now, things are low, so you don't want to sell low if you don't need to. So building up emergency savings and getting that kind of first line of defense will definitely help if you have time to do so. Home equity, biggest issue with that is not enough people that own a home are familiar with a home equity line of credit. If something happens and you didn't have a home equity line of credit and you're like, okay, let me go get this home equity line of credit I just read about. Well, you lost your job. you're not going to get a home equity line of credit. They're not going to approve you, and they are going to check job resources and paychecks to confirm that you're still employed. So you want to get a home equity line of credit now. And the beauty about these things is, as long as you can find one that doesn't have upfront fees to kind of get one in place, and there's a lot that don't, you should be able to find one where it's no fees, no cost to get it set up. And then it works like a credit card. So it just sits there. You don't pay interest on it unless you actually use it. And if you don't use it, then you're not paying anything. So it's a nice cushion emergency. That's really the big one that allows me and my wife to sleep at night, because yeah, a layoff would stink for sure, but our home equity is enough to basically cover her a full year, a salary for her, on top of the other things that we have in place, like emergency savings and things like that. So a home equity alone can really protect you. And interest rates are about 6-7% on home equity line of credit. If you don't have one and you do have significant equity in your home and you're worried about layoffs and a recession, definitely go and do your research, find one that has low costs and low fees to get that in place, just as a safety protector. So I mentioned emergency savings being a resource. Well, what's a good amount of emergency savings? This is kind of the target. If you play darts or anything like that, well, the outside, you're still on the board, right? So 3 months would definitely be helpful. 6 months is really the sweet spot if you're really concerned, if you really don't have any other resources or assets, if you don't have a home equity line of credit you can lean on. 6 months would be kind of a nice spot, I would say. And one of the reasons for that too, when you think about layoffs, is a lot of people don't start looking for a job until they're laid off. And the tech process, the hiring process, through some of the tests and some of the hoops they make you all jump through, these things can be elongated. They might take multiple weeks, multiple months for the same position, especially if all of a sudden, like, oh, we're right to the end. Oh, hiring freeze, start over somewhere else. Like, you might be out multiple months, not because you're not well sought after, but just kind of things that are out of your control. So having as much resources will definitely be helpful there. And why we want to identify these resources, find out what they look like, is really to help with peace of mind. And how you can do that is to figure out, well, how long will these things last? So if you add up your resources and you find out, well, what is that amount that you absolutely need to live off of every single month, those required monthly expenses. If you divide the resources by that required monthly expenses, you're going to have an estimated runway. This is what I did before we launched my business, and I quit my job and did all that. And we're like, okay, we have about 3 years. And that was enough, at least, to talk my wife to kind of let me do my thing and start a business. And so for you and your situation, we're talking about a recession and potential layoffs. Well, what's going to give you peace of mind so you're not thinking about it every night? It's not taking so much of your peace of mind right now. Finding out what your current situation is will help, but then also know that, well, if these things don't happen anytime soon for the next couple months, your resources now might actually be significantly greater a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, if you do start to take action and start making some progress on some of the emergency savings and things like that. Another thing I want to remind you, just because I see it happen a lot, where we're thinking you need to replace your full paycheck, and we'll use a clean example of, well, you make $10,000 a month, gross income $120,000 a year. Well, $10,000 a month, you don't need that all to live off of, because technically you weren't getting about 40% of it anyways. When you're laid off, you're not going to have to worry about taxes. You're not going to necessarily have to worry about employer benefits, but technically life insurance will probably be costly there that you'll want to figure out, especially if you have a family or any health tech things you want to stay on top of. No one's going to expect you to contribute to your retirement if you're not working at the time. You really don't need to start building emergency savings either, because we know that we're going to start pulling from those things. That's why it's there in case of emergencies. Really not essential monthly. You'll probably still have some in there depending on how good you feel, depending on how long your runway is. But if it really is a dire situation, you might just be like, nope, this is all I need. Record monthly, all that funny stuff, that extra fluff. I will cut that out because I want this runway to be as long as possible, so you have as much kind of peace of mind and able to do your best in interviews and all those things that you're going to have to take to kind of improve your situation. You also probably not going to be saving for travel or different goals during a layoff. So really, it's just that chunk, that required monthly. And in this example, we say out of that $10,000 that this person makes, they probably need $6,000 on a monthly basis for those required expenses. They had $20,000 in savings, not really much else because they're early in their career. Well, that will buy them 3.3 months. Unemployment will definitely help with that. So that could be added into a monthly resource to technically reduce the monthly expenses that are coming out of savings, as well as any type of severance pay. So there might be other factors and calculations you might need to bring in. This is just the simplified where this person didn't get those things and they have 3.3 months basically to before they really start relying on credit cards and going into credit card debt there. And the question earlier was, well, should we look at other forms of debt, short-term loans? Sometimes these places require that you have income. And if you say, yes, I have income, they might not check it. But if they find out you lied because you can't pay them for some reason, it could really come back and not be a good situation. That, hey, you lied on this, you said you had an income, clearly you didn't have a job because you were laid off the night that you fill out this application. And so it's definitely a tricky situation is when you need the money, you can't borrow the money basically. So you really want to have the credit cards, home equity line of credit, and any type of resources like that available beforehand because you will not get approved on a lot of situations afterwards. So I'm not a career coach, I'm not a therapist or anything like this, but these are things that I've seen for myself personally, a lot of my clients and just people I'm friends with, where these things do have a ton of value. So it's not just the financial stuff. There's education. You can take online courses. You can do YouTube. There's, again, alternatives, right? You can do something completely free, or you can go and try to get a master's. Well, that's going to cost money, and there's definitely alternatives all along the way. What's right for you, what's right for your goals, and kind of where you're trying to go. Networking. Again, there's definitely lots of free options there. You can pay to rub elbows or go to conferences and things like that. Networking is so important across the board. And the tricky thing with that is most people don't start networking until they need to. Well, there's usually a delayed effect. And really, networking is the most fun and most beneficial and easier to activate when you've already have it, right? You already have a network in place and you're not just coming out of the woodwork saying, hey, I'm here because I need a job and nice to meet you. Do you have a job? Like that's not how good networking works. How good networking works is you're connecting to other people. You're kind of looking out for other people, trying to help them, just because it's fun. But also, yeah, you never know. A couple of months down the line, a couple of years down the line, where all of a sudden you're the one that needs the help, and they'll remember you. They'll kind of vouch for you and kind of say, hey, they helped me out. People remember these things, and if anyone's ever done that for you, make sure you reach out and say thank you, especially now, time of being thankful and things like that. It goes a long way to those people. It actually makes you feel good. I've been doing that a lot more over the last couple of years, just reminding people of how valuable they were to me in different parts of my journey. Health is a big one. I'm not a fitness coach or anything like that, but I can tell from myself personally, when I'm feeling healthy, when things are kind of clicking right, I'm better across the board. I don't interview anymore, but technically when I have new potential clients and stuff, that's kind of like an interview for me, an interview equivalent. Well, I tend to be better. I tend to have a little bit more energy, tend to just feel better. And so those things go a long way. You'll need all of these different tips and tricks in your back pocket in case something did happen and you were laid off. And I think the biggest one, this is probably the kind of therapist area where, again, not one of them, but I know that one of the best things I've ever kind of done is like really thought about, well, what's important to me? What do I care about? And what's the things that really make me tick? And once you kind of know those, it helps just kind of you build your life across the board, helps you find that next position, might help increase your chances at getting that next position. Because if you know that working for a sustainable company is important to you, well, those are probably the only companies you're going to apply for, and you're going to seem like you're more energetic and passionate about it than someone that's like, oh, they're just there because they need a job. Well, you're there because you need a job, plus you care about being sustainable, and you're so passionate about it, it's going to come off through those types of things. So if you know yourself, you'll be able to kind of hone and build the life that you want to build just a little bit better, a little bit more efficient, and it makes things feel seamless. So I know we're rocking and rolling through this thing ultra quick. Definitely keep shooting through a Q&A. I'm going to be wrapping this up here in the next couple of slides. But this is your recession strategy guide. Like, focus on what you can control. That's really all you can do. And the nice thing is, for most of us watching this and here in this position today, you're not currently working 3 jobs and juggling all kinds of stuff. Like, you probably have time to figure out your budget stuff and get progress on it. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to feel good, but you can do it. You can control that and just set time And the nice thing is with any type of habit, if you show up consistently, you start doing it, it's going to be easier. And it feels good once you kind of are like, yep, I know where that's going. And so if something did happen, you'll be able to identify those. Identifying your resources, super important. Know where your stuff is. You don't want to be scrambling while frantic after the fact, being like, oh, what does this all mean? I don't know what this means or where I'm at. Well, that's what getting your strategy guide ready now. Hopefully you weren't laid off today or tomorrow. Knock on wood behind me. Like, hopefully you have time if you don't feel like you're in position to write out a layoff, and take the time and start making that progress now, because it could happen in a couple of weeks. And you only had a couple of weeks to get your stuff aligned, but it's better than not having it ready. You can estimate your runway, and mainly that's going to give you that peace of mind, like, oh, I actually would be okay if it did happen. And that's kind of where I sit right now, where we've calculated our runway, and it's like, obviously we don't want to burn through these resources, but we are definitely be fine. And I want you to get more fine every single week, every single month, if that's what you need to do, and invest in yourself. So those are really the key pieces. And if you do that, if you kind of go through these steps and kind of figure out, well, what's your situation, what's your strategy guide, if you don't experience a layoff, you're going to be sitting way better, obviously, than experiencing a layoff. And we'll kind of talk through what these things mean. But even if you don't experience a layoff right now, you're creating peace of mind for yourself by going through this process, figuring out where your money is going, knowing what you can control, and if you need to make adjustments, if and when in the future, how long you'd be able to ride those things out. So knowing where your stuff is, that clarity is that magnifying glass. And if you've already set it yourself up, you already have the emergency savings, you just kind of had excess stuff going on because you found ways to save more money than you were previously. Well, you can invest those things, and right now you're going to be buying things at discounts, so you'll actually be better off than you were if you didn't find a way to save an extra $100 or $200. I've had people that seriously, they decided that they wanted to start looking at their expenses and figuring out what's important to them and where their money's going, because they realized that their wedding was coming up in a year and not 2 or 3 years, like the other significant other was thinking. And all it took was them looking at it and having that drive and reason to really take a look and see where the excess fluff is. And once they did that, they found, I think it was $800 just within our phone call of expenses that, nope, we can get rid of that. We can get rid of that. It's not important. And if you're able to do that, you're able to apply it somewhere where it is important. So that could be investments that kind of help make life easier. This new habit here, that's what that guy is. Having a new habit that's you made happen, it feels good. If you are making progress and every single month you get to see that progress being made, no one's going to be able to take that away from you. So that's one of the benefits of leveling up, right? Is you make progress and no one's going to be able to take that from you. You might also have more opportunities now because you've built up more savings. You know where your stuff is, so you're more willing to take career risks. You're willing to take a sabbatical. Maybe you're like, oh, you know what, I'd actually be fine. Like, I hope they lay me off, like the Twitter chaos that's been going on. Or maybe you just want to take time off without being forced to be laid off. Like, if you find that out after going through this progress, that's a huge win. I know someone here today that looked at all their stuff. We looked at all their stuff and they're like, yep, don't need to work. Let's go and kind of get stuff figured out, figure out what those next steps are going to be. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be scary to start going through resources, but now you at least know what's possible and what your options are. So you have more flexibility with your career, with your life, and how you want to build that just by going through this kind of basic process. This is what I would say, like a really dive in the dirt kind of chaotic, like planning, like, hey, let's make sure that the core bases are figured out. But from here, you can build forward. You can build a more complex plan. So we're not just figuring out, well, what about layoffs? Well, what about next year and 2 years and 5 years from now? There's a lot of cool stuff you can do. Once you have your base plan, you're able to start building from there. And the last one is going to be career specific. So if you took that education, if you built your network, new opportunities are going to pop up all the time, and you'll be able to kind of move on throughout your career that way. If you did experience layoff, obviously it's unfortunate. Definitely make sure you have your network, land on your network. It's definitely lonely, kind of scary for all those different things, that whole identity thing, lots of fear, but hopefully getting the strategy guide in place just gives you a little bit more peace of mind, a little bit more confidence. Like, hey, you know what? I was hoping I didn't have to pull out, but now I'm pulling out my strategy guide. This is what it says. I know where my stuff is, so I have clarity on that, and I know what this all means. And at least I have good habits now. So I started changing my spending patterns. So now those expenses are less. Your runway might be longer because you found other expenses to kind of reduce. So longer runway because you made better spending decisions, better spending habits, and then you're able to rebound faster. So that's what the first aid kit is you're going to bounce back stronger than you would if you didn't go through this process. If you didn't know where your stuff was, if you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, you're actually in a way better spot for going through all this process and getting things in place, which is going to create more flexibility for you too. So if you were laid off, you might realize like, oh, I actually have enough resources. I got 6 months here, or I got 1 year here of resources. Like maybe this layoff was a good thing and you have more flexibility there. And then, if you've done the networking, I've seen people get laid off and get a $50,000 pay raise at the next spot a couple months later because of what the layoff occurred. So a layoff is not the end. There's lots of other alternatives and options if you do what you need to kind of put yourself in position to level up. You're in charge. You can control this for sure. So what's next? Take action. Again, don't just say, hey, I went to this thing. It was good information, and let that be the end of it. Like, what can you take today and start changing and start implementing to improve your financial situation? And if y'all can come up, we can do some Q&A for the end. If you want to reach out, social sites are usually the best. I'll look through the chat just in case anything came through. I was mainly monitoring the Q&A.
Let's see. I think overall, I don't think we got any questions, just more so conversation, really good conversation that was going through the chat. Lucas, you were able to grab all the questions, so you're good there. As far as like the next phase of things, we can go ahead and if anyone has any questions or would like to come up to speak, you can do so. I think I could move you up so you can like come off mic. Or like I think the easiest way to manage this is if you have a question or if you would like to share something, if you could raise your hand in the Slack, not the Slack, in the Zoom, that'd be awesome. So that way I know to go ahead and let you come up to speak, and then we can go from there. Also, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Yeah, I think that's housekeeping. Overall, Lucas, thank you so much for putting this together. I feel like I thought I had my stuff together, but I was able to learn a lot just watching and listening to you. So I think that's really awesome. My Zoom is looking really weird. Okay, there we go. So yeah, I thought that was really great. I really love the fact that you also talked about the like more human aspect of all of this. Like, yes, it's a recession. Yes, people can lose their job. There's a lot of numbers that we could look at, but I really love the fact that you started this conversation talking about losing your job may make you feel like you're losing a part of your identity. And I think that's a really big thing. I know when I got laid off, that was a big question that I had for myself. And I don't hear very many people who are into finance talking about this stuff like that. So big thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely welcome. Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone that attended. In case you're going to be popping off, I'll be sitting here with Val to answer any additional questions. You can ask anonymously too. I don't know quite how to do it, but I did see anonymous questions coming in. So you can definitely shoot them over if you wanted to be a little bit more secretive about who's asking.
Yeah, and I actually don't know how to navigate sharing to people how to ask anonymous questions or anonymous questions. I actually don't know how to do that either. You're very welcome, everyone who joined. A big thank you to all of you who are tuning in online, who are not currently in the active Zoom. This has been a really great session. Like I said before, if you are looking for links for this afterwards, I'm going to email everyone out additional links and resources so that they can have this after the fact. Again, we did live stream this on all of our social media platforms. So make sure you give us a follow on Twitter while it's still there, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and all of the, cool spots. We're there. And if you really did enjoy this workshop and you want to see or find out more stuff that we're doing, go ahead and take a look at our website. If you're not a member, definitely go ahead and join to be a Tech by Choice member today. We do have a lot of really cool stuff that we're getting ready to roll out for our community, as well as Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is coming up, so we're going to be fundraising to have a lot of really cool stuff happen for the community next year. I need to get back on the TBC Slack. Yes, Leo, we miss you. There's lots of things that we could be talking about in Slack. We'd love to see you join us again. And for those who are wondering, how do you access the Tech by Choice Slack? By becoming a Tech by Choice member, you get access to our Slack group. You'll be able to access our membership platform that is coming out by the end of this year. We'll be releasing that, and that will go live. Through that platform, you'll get access to mentors. We have a mentor matching platform that we've built out. We also have a job matching platform. So a lot of the things that we talked about lots of jobs and being able to connect with companies and be able to network, we're trying to build a platform that will allow everyone to have a easier time doing that. We'll have membership spotlight so we can learn about who's in the community. And we have a lot more planned for the next few releases. We're just trying to get this up and out of the door first. I think everyone here is mostly members, so I won't go into the whole spill. But it was really great chatting with all of you. I
saw one more question came in, anonymous. So I have a real problem saving money. What is a small step you can take to keep yourself afloat? So the biggest thing is you acknowledge that you might have a problem, right? So that's definitely the first thing, admitting that there's something you could probably improve upon. And from there, I think even just those basic 3 questions, well, do you need it? So slow down. Do you need it? Do you need it now? Is there another alternative? So if there was something you were gonna do anyways, but you're able to find an alternative that's gonna save you some money, well, you just save some money there, right? So you're gonna spend money for this solution anyways. You found something that's gonna save you a couple dollars. Well, that's one way you can just kind of save money. It's definitely gonna come down to just kind of personal control and really one good way to kind of weigh against something. Well, what is important to you? Are you stressed right now about any potential layoff or anything else? Like if there's something that's important to you that you always want to do, but you just haven't been able to do it and you're not sure why. Well, if traveling is important to you, to find out like, hey, I was gonna do this, but you know what? I would have spent money there. I'm just gonna put it into this travel account. So I'm spending the money on my future travel, and that's where the money's going. So when you think about those pair of shoes you could have been wearing, you can look in your bank account. You still have the money. Technically, you can pull it out and do that, but you're probably gonna feel good that you're starting to see that travel account grow. So find something that's more important to you than whatever that just miscellaneous expense, that miscellaneous thing is, and use that as your kind of compare and contrast. There doesn't have to be the same thing to say, I'd rather spend money on this than that. Well, that's pretty powerful when you kind of compare things of value and how much value they provide you.
That was I feel like that question, that was not a question I posted, but that was a question and answer I needed. Because I'm just thinking like, oh, I do need to start saving a little bit more. I have a question for you, Lucas. Are you currently accepting clients right now?
Yeah, so I'm always going back and forth depending on how crazy it is. So right now, leading up to tax season, I am taking clients for the next few months. Once I get into February, I'll probably pause that for a few months to get through tax season because I do taxes for clients as well. But right now is open. I am open for people that would think that they'd have a lot of fun working with me. And obviously we'll have a conversation, make sure we confirm that. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm not going to be able to add a ton of value for you are you going to have fun? I don't want this to be a dreaded, like, oh man, I got to meet with a financial person. Like, probably not going to be a good fit. I like having fun. I like thinking positive thoughts and thinking that we can really make some progress. So if that sounds like a good fit and the next couple months you want to get going, definitely reach out. You can always reach out during tax season too. Worst case scenarios, I'll put you on a wait list or find someone else that might be an equivalent that I think would be able to still take care of you at a different company.
Awesome. Love that. And another question that I get a lot from people is, should someone try to clean up their credit or their finances or try to get out of debt before booking that first call with you?
Do not. So I've seen a lot of people make bad moves. Again, some of these things are tricky, right? If you paid off an auto loan when you have all this crazy credit card debt, like that's something I see a lot where it's like, I actually could have helped you save like thousands of dollars by just making a different decision. Don't feel ashamed of whatever your financial situation is. I've seen the whole gamut. I've worked with a bunch, and quite honestly, like the more value I'm gonna be able to provide, I'm all for it. That means we're going to be meeting more. If we're going to be talking about credit cards more than investments, that's what I really enjoy doing, is just really bringing as much value. And if you've done some of the work, it might have taken you longer to get there. You might have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get to that point before reaching out. So if you reach out to me before you do that, we can probably make progress faster. Make sure we're making the right steps and not getting yourself locked into somewhere it's like, it's still okay, but we probably could have done better, made a better decision. So yeah, I think a lot of that does come down to not feeling good about that financial situation here. But I've seen the whole thing, and I've also seen people turn it around once we like get things crystal clear. It's like, hey, here's where you are. This is what we need to do. Start moving in this direction. And I don't expect people to do it overnight, but I expect people to be willing to change and be willing to make that progress if we're working together. And yeah, luckily my clients self-screen, right? Like they reach out because they actually do want to make progress. They're actually going to make that progress. So yeah, it's one of my biggest things. Like I wish you would just contact me a week sooner, a month sooner, or whatever it was, where they started doing their own things. Because yeah, that's what I've tend to find. It's like, we probably could have done it a little bit better.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And what was the other? So another question I get a lot when I tell people like, yeah, you should definitely get a financial planner. Do they have to print out a lot of paperwork or do like have a lot of PDFs ready to go over everything in their bank statement just for their first phone call?
So a lot of financial advisors, yes, right? And just really quick on level of financial planning, I probably could have done better at the beginning of talking about it. Level of financial plan is different than most financial planners. I don't care about your investments. I don't care if you don't have money. Like that's why we're talking. We're going to make sure that we start getting on track and feeling good about those things. Most financial planners, they do want that stuff because they want to see, well, how much money do you have already? Like, what can I manage for your investments? And so that's why they do it. I actually don't require any of that upfront. It's the second official meeting in the process where it's like, we're going to hunt down this information, but we can hunt it down together. So you don't have to feel like you have to wrap your arms around this. Everything is 100% digital. I work virtually. The only paper I have is my little notebook I have here, but I still do a lot of stuff electronically online. So yeah, not all financial planners, but definitely ask those questions if there's one that you're interested in working with. If it's not me, just being like, hey, that's perfect. Fine. Ask a question like, hey, do you need this stuff? But for me, I found that to make progress as fast as possible and to help people feel more confident about it and not waste their own time, just kind of turning the wheels is, yeah, we'll jump on a call, we'll jump in a meeting. The meeting is actually hunting down that stuff with you alongside you to make sure that you're not overwhelmed by that situation.
Awesome. Love that. Gonna be honest, a lot of those questions for me, I've known you for years now, and you've always said like sign up, book your call. I'm just like, not sure if I'm ready yet, but I think like if there's any time to do it, now is now the time.
Yep.
So
And you know where to find me, Val.
yes. I hope those questions that I asked helped other people who are on the fence about either signing up to speak to Lucas or speak to another financial planner. These are also just questions that I've heard other people ask and be nervous about. Yes, do it. And everyone else, please reach out. Lucas has been a really great resource for the TBC community. as well as like individuals in the community and a couple people I know in this call too, that have nothing but great things to say about the help that Lucas has been able to give. And so completely lost my train of thought there. It's late in the day for me. I think at this point I've been up for 12 hours. I don't know. A couple weeks ago, I was traveling to the not East Coast, Central Coast, Central Mountain Standard, whatever, Mountain Standard, no, Central. And I haven't adjusted to the time difference yet. So this is all very strange to me. But I think this has been an amazing workshop. I feel like I've gotten a lot out of this. Like I do every time you come by and speak to the Tech by Choice community. We are so lucky to have someone like you who not only is like an active member, but you also like you're able to jump in and answer questions that we have in our chat, as well as realize like we've had a lot of discussions about layoffs and you're like, hey, I can provide this resource. So forever grateful for the support you've given this community. Definitely helped us keep going during some of the difficult times. So it means a lot. And again, thank you to everyone who came out. I know that this topic is very close to some folks, and whether you've been laid off currently or looking for work or just nervous about what's happening in the future. I always tell people that Tech by Choice is a community that is focused on making sure that we get through stuff together. We don't always have all the answers. We may just be able to vent together, but I know if there's more of us talking about this, we'll find an answer that will help all, if not most of all. I think I said that right. But yeah, thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and stop the live share, and then we'll start to officially close out in the